Thank you and welcome to ETTelecom Digital Telecom Summit. 2020 has become the year that has changed everything. And after 30 years of incremental growth in user penetration and evolution of customer needs, services across the world, we have really had to make a step change. It's been a shock to the system, really. And in the last 30 years, the trend lines have forever gone in an upwards direction. More users and more usage. 30 years ago, access to mobile was not equal. And for much of the 30 years, South Asia has been playing catch up with the advanced markets. But more recently, Asia has become the home of the world-leading innovation and services and pioneer launches of 5G. But in 2020, we've been challenged by a global pandemic that highlighted we could do more. Considered in the overall picture, mobile has provided a cushion to the economic and social shock of COVID-19. By and large, at a high level, it could be said the industry and the government collaborated in many markets to keep people connected, businesses online, and the pandemic in check with communication of information on the virus. But we must admit there was times when we didn't get it right and we weren't prepared. At a time when networks had to rapidly deploy new coverage and capacities, engineers in some markets and countries were not considered emerging workers, and it was difficult to maintain networks and support the economy. Cumbersome site approval processes were discouraging when efforts were made to create emergency cover for hospitals, and many countries in South Asia, already with limited and constrained spectrum allocation, struggled to meet the need for additional spectrum. The good news is in some countries we've seen unprecedented collaboration between industry, Ministry of ICT, and other ministries including health, education and finance. Whole of government engagement to fight the virus threat to the economy and the society has provided a reference for what we now must do to achieve each nation's digital vision. We cannot continue to drive policy and regulate ICT as an isolated vertical sector. COVID-19 has shown the value of a connected population in responding to the economic and society shock of pandemic control measures. Even the most advanced nations around the world have concluded they were not adequately prepared, or they could have done better. And they must accelerate the digital transformation of economies and get people online. Nations with over 85% mobile broadband penetration and over 90% subscriber penetration are seeking ways to improve and accelerate transformation to digital. Reports estimate that the pandemic has put poverty rates back over 20 years, widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. This is going to have an impact, especially in South Asia, but what we must collectively agree not to happen is for the gap between advanced digital economies and emerging markets to wind back 20 years. Across much of South Asia, mobile broadband and subscriber penetration is less than half of pioneer 5G markets. Around 50% of the subscriber base live within mobile broadband coverage, but do not have or use mobile broadband. On the critical point of investment to achieve digital visions, South Asia is disproportionately low in attracting investment. Regulatory frameworks must be modernized to foster and facilitate investment, innovation and growth for strong foundations for digital transformation. Relying on population size and low mobile penetration as a business opportunity is not enough going forward. What we can do now is apply that whole of government methodology used to combat the virus to building the foundations for digital transformation. Work towards the digital vision and not myopic vertical sector regulation is going to be the solution. The GSMA is developing a report on the benefits and advantages to a whole of government approach to ICT. Many of you on the call today, listening to my speech here and my presentation, your agencies and your organizations have been in contact to be involved in that report. I would encourage you to have participated in that report and be part of the GSMA Thrive event later in November, where the merits and the debates of whole of government methodology will be debated and success contrasted. An important step in the journey is obviously this convening the Digital Telecom Summit here today to discuss the issues that are chasing and challenging and facing the industry as move forward, going forward. I would like to thank the Economic Times for convening this forum today and for you joining this debate and participating and watching these sessions. The importance of bringing the industry together with governments, vendors and mobile operators to discuss these issues is a significant step in how we move forward and have a more resilient economy moving forward. COVID-19 has shown us the time to act was yesterday. We continue to respond to the virus with increasing confidence and accomplishment. However, we must ask ourselves whether we have done enough. Digital networks and mobile networks across the region have provided a great resource and cushion to the measures we've had to do with COVID-19. But whether we are building a connected population as an asset for economic and social resilience, or whether we are regulating a luxury item, I would argue mobile is no longer a luxury and it's a critical national asset and resource that we must develop so that we are better prepared for future pandemics and national disasters, but also because an inclusive digital economy will help us recover the setbacks in poverty and SDGs that the virus has created. Together, we need to act now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time for discussion today. Let me start by asking, as a regional head for the top telco group, what are your key suggestions for the Asian markets as they embark on digital transformation?
I think it's important to understand the diversity of the region when we consider Asia's digital transformation journey. Mobile internet penetration across APAC is about 48%, but there's a wide difference across the region. And in advanced markets such as Australia, Japan, Singapore, Korea, it is over 80%. And at the other end of the scale, South Asian countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan are in the lower range from 25 to 35%. So the digital transformation journey varies significantly across the region. For countries in South Asia, this means that we need significant regulatory reform, which is difficult but necessary, and there is no time to waste to ensure that we do not fall further behind the advanced economies. As well as regulatory reform, we would suggest the countries in South Asia need to focus on getting 4G right, pushing advancements in areas such as identity, digital commerce and payments, and cross-ecosystem collaboration. This will provide the foundation to ensure 5G is launched at the right time, under the right conditions, to promote a sustainable and competitive 5G mobile industry. In more advanced economies, many of the countries have already launched 5G and are well on track with their digital transformation roadmaps. However, the pandemic has exposed weaknesses even in those countries. By example, elderly citizens and small business haven't necessarily had the resources or the services that allow them to respond to COVID-19 control measures. So 2020 has been a challenge by the pandemic, and therefore the industry and the government really need to come and collaborate to overcome this situation. Regulation needs to evolve with the current situation, and we need to be better prepared to foster digital economies. Wired broadband penetration is low in most Asian countries, and so wireless becomes even more important. But on the wireless side, we have cumbersome right-of-way approval processes. We're not allocating enough spectrum at a reasonable price, and we don't have a whole of a government approach. So it's making it difficult in some countries to increase mobile broadband penetration at a fast pace. Furthermore, there are certain areas where serious efforts are required to really grow the digital skills, upgrade people, reskill them, and then fix 4G in terms of capacity and coverage, and a need for increased fiberization really required a conducive regulatory environment to encourage the investment and innovation that's going to drive those issues. So we believe there's an urgent need for regulatory modernization to accelerate broadband penetration, digital transformation, in a sustainable and orderly growth of mobile industry that will encourage investment so that we can achieve objectives of growing mobile broadband penetration and providing a more resilient response to shocks such as COVID-19.
Sure. So since 5G is poised to drive economic growth, do you think light-touch regulatory regime is something which is much needed?
In a recent report, GSMA estimated the total economic impact of 5G on global GDP could reach 2.2 trillion by 2034. So when you talk about light touch, it's like, what does light touch mean? Does light touch mean we don't really touch what we have, or does that mean we thin it out and make it more efficient? And certainly we believe to maintain and grow the innovation and investment that's required to deliver that 5G economic return, a light touch regulatory regime is desirable. Basically, broad and timely deployment of 5G requires a clearly defined policy framework to ensure efficient rollout. You need to ensure efficient deployment of 5G and optimize benefits of investments. Broad collaboration between network operators, public and private sectors is needed to ensure that society benefits are realized across all 5G use cases. And basically, we've identified 8 key regulatory levers that could help foster infrastructure investment in 5G. So first one would be about making additional affordable spectrum available, a key obvious one. A second key one is facilitating access to site locations, reducing the administrative and regulatory burden of establishing new sites, because obviously 5G requires significant investment in new sites. We also need to enable small cell deployment. So that means on street furniture and in the street, it needs to be easy to deploy small cells. And then, so number 4 is around, we need to facilitate deployment of backhaul. So backhaul obviously becomes significant when you've got high capacity connections. We also need to permit the freedom to establish network sharing agreements. 5G is about creating the most efficient network deployment framework that possibly can. So not only reducing the admin burden of site locations and site development, but also allow operators to share and create shared infrastructure to reduce the cost of rollout. Obviously then on top of that, we need to make sure we are around harmonizing power density limits and providing adequate subsidies for deployments in underserved areas. And then overall provide a regulatory flexibility for vertical partnerships to deliver innovation in vertical spaces. So,
right.
Yes, all in all. So a very challenging environment, but something that can be achieved.
Sure. So what's the quantum of investment projected in telecom networks, including 5G in Asia region? Do you have any finding to support this?
Sure. We published our APAC mobile economy study earlier in the year. And so to put things in perspective, in 2025, we're talking about 70% or 3 billion of people in the APAC region connecting to a mobile service, and around 61% of the people being mobile broadband users. By 2025, you're talking around 65% are using 4G, with around 23% are using 5G, so around 1.1 billion people using 5G. That's across the whole APAC region. Obviously, that varies significantly by country. In places like India, we expect about a 7% penetration using 5G. So in 2025, we estimate mobile operator revenues across the region are around 400 billion in a per annum basis. And in that context, we estimate across Asia from now to 2025, operator CapEx will be around 414 billion, with around 80% of that being on 5G. And obviously, depending on the country, that can be quite back-end loaded. So, in some countries, it's still all 4G investment and 5G investment in the future, but some countries obviously are spending most of their CapEx now on 5G.
So as you know, India's telecom sector is highly stressed. So what, according to you, are the key demands or recommendations from the government?
Sure.
What do you suggest?
Yes. Well, I mean, we all know the Indian mobile market has been a period of turbulence over the last few years, since 2016. From a consumer's perspective, things look good. The price war has resulted in India having some of the cheapest mobile data pricing in the world, while increased availability of affordable handsets has helped push 4G to almost 60% of connections, which are much higher than adjacent countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, where it's like 25 and 10% respectively. A lot of this has been driven, obviously by one mobile operator and the price war that it's got there. Unfortunately, it's had significant impact on operator financials. The annual industry revenues have declined by over a quarter, over 26% since 2016, while annual EBIT has dropped from, a healthy sort of 2.7 billion to the negatives. And so in that same time frame, not only has this had a big impact on market consolidation, but it's had a serious impact on compromising the investment levels and the attractiveness of investing in India. So with falling investment levels, total operator CapEx last year declined by about 22% in the second half. It's an indicator that the market is unsustainable and we need a rebalancing, including immediate implementation of things like the National Digital Communications Policy, if India is to become a digital powerhouse and continue on its journey. Particularly the following issues, I would say, need to be solved on a priority basis. That's really around rights of way. It should be a unified procedure. It should be implemented across India with a single sort of window for management and clearance. We need allocation of more backhaul spectrum. We need a rationalization of the spectrum prices across all access spectrum in all bands for the sustainability of the mobile industry. And we need a rationalization of regulatory levels. It's a very complex regulatory level framework, regulatory fee and levy framework in India. And, they've got things like spectrum usage charges, which could be abolished since presently spectrum has been acquired via an auction or via market determined prices. And really license fees, we think, should be reduced from around 8% to 3% and consideration of the US. And now that the Honourable Supreme Court has gone through the process around AGR, some clarification and simplification of the AGR definition really needs to be done.
So coming back to 5G, what are the global learnings that you would like to share with Indian operators, especially when it comes to use cases?
been some significant learnings in the last 18 months. We're sort of 18 months into launches. And a key thing is obviously 5G needs a significant amount of harmonized mobile spectrum. So defragmenting and clearing prime spectrum bands needs to be priorities because it takes some time, especially in some markets. Regulators should be aiming to make somewhere between 80 and 100 megahertz of contiguous spectrum per operator in the prime 5G bands, so the 3.5 or around 1 gig, so low, middle. In high bands, we're looking for around a gigahertz of spectrum, millimeter wave spectrum required. And so we need a spectrum across all three, low, mid and high range bands to deliver the widespread coverage and support all the use cases. Our recommendation would be to avoid inflating 5G spectrum prices, especially in places like India, where the economy, the industry is really, struggling from an investment point of view. Because high 5G spectrum prices is just going to risk limiting network investment and drive up the cost of service and slow down the rollout and take up. So really reduction in excessive reserve prices or annual fees, limiting spectrum supply, or excessive obligations are really going to be handbrakes on India's 5G journey. Looking around the region and around the world, some countries have even skipped the auction process, places like New Zealand and Singapore, and allocated spectrum in the ambition of delivering the larger national digital interests. So some key global learnings would be obviously low price 5G smartphones and what you can do to help them enter the market. Major traffic contributors of early adopters around high quality video streaming, video conference, remote education, healthcare. In the enterprise space, BT, business to business use cases and business models take time to develop and time to innovate. New pricing, differentiated values will come with time. But you need to make sure that there's a framework to encourage an ecosystem to grow and stimulate and start innovating. Obviously, from a rollout point of view and availability, you need a quick network and the user experience needs to stabilize. In the last 18 months, we've seen significant growth in speed across early launches as networks have stabilized. And that has done a significant amount in helping grow customer satisfaction and also adoption for innovation in the enterprise space. And at the end of the day, you need some cost-effective and alternative supply options, such as Open RAN, to allow operators to deploy and innovate in their network deployment space. Things like Open RAN are starting to mature, and it can no longer be seen as greenfield or edgy technology, and we should encourage those sort of things. So there's also a need for an urgent need of rationalization of spectrum prices at affordable levels to support the 5G journey.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out your time and providing us your insights. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.